And we are done, right? Perfect. So my voice is slightly better. I wouldn't say good, but slightly better. This is an hour presentation about OMS in the real world. In the real world means we're not going to focus so much on how it actually works, more of how you can actually use it. Because that's the important thing, at least when, in my opinion, it's more important to know what to use it for and how to use it. I guess some of you are currently using OMS or any kind of other monitoring application, hopefully. It's so funny when you come to a customer and they go like, we don't need monitoring, we don't have any issues. Right. How do you know that? Still, about me and my website. And let's start talking about solutions. Microsoft is adding solutions all the time. Some of them are ready-made. You can really use them directly. And some of them does require some kind of configuration or have other requirements before they work. Or they can require something like you need Ops Manager, or you need Virtual Machine Manager, or you need an Azure account, or something like that. They also cost. They are all free, but you do pay for them. It's just that you don't pay for the feature, you pay for the amount of data that is transferred. Let's say that you have an application, you want to monitor an application. So you need to monitor the application log. So now you need to collect the log files. You need to collect the application log from 6,000 servers. That's going to generate terabytes in data. You need to pay for the data. And that's the cost. So before you start adding all these management or solutions, you should be aware of the fact that they do cost money. So before we do that, let's go back and see how much they cost, actually. How can a web page be slow? This is something that puzzles me from time to time. Oh, yeah. This is the nice thing about doing cloud-based demos. Anybody got a phone number to Azure? I would like to call him and say it's slow and they can speed it up. I actually had a customer asking that. How do you call Azure? And I was like, what do you mean call Azure? Well, we subscribe for this Azure. How do you call them? You don't really know anything about computers, do you? No, for God's sake. It's actually loading. It just takes forever. So is the machine doing anything important? I don't think so. Amazing. How can a web page consume that much? But let's start killing some overview. We don't need that one. And we can remove that one. And we can remove that one. And we can remove that one as well. See if that helps. Yeah. It's a web page. It's consuming 1.5 gig of RAM. That's actually an achievement. So usage per solution, I showed you this yesterday, but it's very important that you really understand how this works. And you can see the total amount of data that we are collecting. And this is kind of weird because it says data plan free, so we're not paying for this. But we should, because we are exceeding the 500 megabytes per day. It's just that we have this very weird account, and I'd like to keep that account forever. We never pay. It's just we can add as much data as we want to, but only for this subscription. If you go to the estimated cost, it's going to tell you, I'm sorry, how much this is going to cost. So it would cost, if you have a standard plan, $509 US, or if you do premium, it's going to cost me $775 US per year. Now, the difference between standard and premium is the number of days. 30 days versus 1 year. The amount of data that you're allowed to upload is unlimited anyway. So why would you have a premium account? Backtracking, creating some kind of cost estimation or usage over the year or something like that. So for the immediate, I want to know if stuff is working correctly or not working correctly. You don't need that. But if you want to do a correct analysis of data over the year, why would you do that? What's the purpose of doing things like that? Prediction, exactly. Is that something that everybody should do? How many are actually doing that? In percentage. Let's grab every IT company on the planet, IT-based company. How many of them actually do any kind of prediction? None. Because it's always the same thing. Oh my God, the hard drive is full. We need to get a new one. Can you run down to the nearest store and buy one? How many of you have ever done that? The ones that didn't raise your hand, you're either lying or you told someone else to do it. Because it's always the same thing. Or you call someone, or you order someone. How many of you have received a piece of hardware in a taxi late some night? Spare parts, hard drives, an extra server, because of no prediction whatsoever, right? I don't know why that is, but in general, I think the male population of the planet has the same problem, because I do the same thing when anniversary comes up. Like, I have been married to my wife for 2 years, and I still can't remember the date, so I have it in the calendar, and it warns me 18 hours before. And it's always the same panic. Oh my God, is that tomorrow? Prediction. So, as long as you know what you're paying for, that's fine. The solutions that we have are pretty good. And Microsoft is adding new solutions, I would say, approximately every month. They started to do coming soon, not that long ago. So now we can see that, hey, at least they're coming. This is amazing. How is this even possible? I don't have time for that. Would you believe me if I said just about 15 minutes ago I had no issues whatsoever? suddenly it just goes down. At least it's not consuming 1.5 gig of RAM, but close that. Anybody want to tell a nice story? Not even funny. Let's try another server. This server is located approximately 6-7 millimeters next to the other one. So, of course, this is much better. Go back here again. You can expect more of these solutions packs to come. You can also expect that eventually there will be room for third-party. Today there is no third-party extension, but we expect that to happen eventually. It could also end up in other locations as well through Azure. They're also renaming and rebranding some of these components. We have most of them. The ones I would like to highlight is actually this one, Active Directory Assessment. We use it heavily. It's good, but it does have a couple of flaws. The ones that I hate is this. It says uninstall unsupported server roles. So that means that I have something on my domain controller that is unsupported. How many of you believe this is true? It's incorrect. It's false. They are running a DHCP server. Since when is DHCP server not a supported server role on a domain controller? It's not supported when you run them in Azure. So it's going to warn me that they do have an unsupported role if I move this domain controller to Azure and run it as a virtual machine in Azure, which I don't. But if I'm planning to do so, I need to remove the role DHCP server because it's unsupported. Does it say that? No. It says these two domain controllers have unsupported roles. And if you select them, you're just going to say that, yes, there's something wrong, and you need to go through one or more roles, operations, blah, blah, blah. And if you open it up, it says here, without remote desktop connection, you will be able to connect to the mentioned Azure, blah, 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 machines. One or more services running unsupported hosted, unsupported on Microsoft Azure hosted virtual machines. So you really need to understand that some of these assessment is not correct. The other ones is fine. Another component that people usually tend to add is this one, configuration assessment. Configuration assessment is a really good starting point when you want to fix things. Now you need to be open-minded here, and you need to do what people usually do when it comes to monitoring. If I have a monitoring application and the monitoring application says you should increase the temp database size on your SQL Server, what do you do then? You increase it, right? Because you assume that is correct. Does that apply to everyone here? If I tell you that you should drive on the right side of the road, how many of you will argue and say, no, I prefer to drive on the left side instead? Depending if you're in England or in Norway, but you're in Norway, right? Every time we do this, there's always a bunch of opinions. I think people can take their opinions and shove it somewhere because it's just useless discussion. You can't change these rules. They are made by someone that invented the product. You need to first assume they are correct and do what they are telling you to do. And then maybe you can argue and say, well, in this case, I actually know more, so we don't need to do that. But if I go into SQL Server and check the alerts for that, you're going to find a lot of information that someone should do. You can turn them off, you can override them, of course, you can ignore them, but the kind of information that this solution pack gives you are things like, well, that's nice. Backup didn't work. Something is wrong with whatever database settings. The database wasn't clean, shut down. Some of these events means you're managing your servers incorrectly. Some of them means you should change the behavior. Some of them means you need to install, update, modify, and configure things. If you're not prepared to do that, you shouldn't do configuration assessment at all. It does have security and audit. I like this when I come to new customers just because it gives you really nice input. For instance, in the middle you can see failed logons. If I go to failed logons, it's just going to be a dump from the log. Anybody have a vague idea why this is happening? 1,042 logons from this C/A. What's that? It's from the network. Domain is C. We don't have a domain that's named C. Well, it comes from CLDRS01, which is the directory synchronization application. It synchronized the Azure account. So there's something wrong with the synchronization, obviously. Or it's trying to create an account that is in the Azure Active Directory, but we don't have it locally and can't create it, or something similar like that. The problem with all these kind of information is that you need to be a jack of all trades to understand this. You can't configure this dashboard to be unique per person. The dashboard is always the dashboard. So you need to look at things you know, and you need to look at things you understand, and maybe you need to do that as well. Or we need to have someone that looks at this and tells you, there's something wrong here, can you check that up? So it needs to spread down to the organization. If you go to accounts authenticated, you can see it's been dropping down from 89 to 7. One of the funniest things we can see when we do this is actually a domain, an account called administrator. Right now, this is actually pretty good. We can see that the three top ones, that's service accounts. They are supposed to log on often, right? Last time I did this for a customer, the top one log on count was the domain administrator account. How come? They are using the domain administrator account as a runner's account for basically everything. It had more than 1 million log-ons. And the customer says, how do you fix that? It's pretty easy, right? We just change the password. And then everything breaks. And then we figure out what did break, and then we change the account for that. That's a 6 months work to get it straight in a large environment. And it takes 1 minute to find the issue using OMS. We can also see other things. In this case, you can see that the administrator is actually not used. You can see I'm used pretty much. That's something bad. But we can see, let's pick up that one. This is a colleague of mine. And I know how much he's working. So I could say that, well, but this number of logons are incorrect. It should be lower because he's only using it for interactive logons. And if you start trickling this down, you can see that he's been logging on to this server 960 times last day. He's is that normal? So what can we expect about this? Most likely he's logged on somewhere with a remote session up and running. He didn't log off. He didn't log out. Or there's a run book. Or there's a script. Or there's a scheduled task somewhere. That's why we should have different names and different conventions for service accounts and for interactive accounts. And it's pretty easy to find this. Distinct IP addresses addressed. This is another really nice way to see what's going on. These are IP addresses accessed by systems in our environment, not using the name. Instead, they are using the IP address. Why? Do you use the IP address when you connect to machines? Yeah, but usually you use the name, right? And we should use the name because it's something called DNS. Ever heard of it? No. Name services thing? Sometimes we can find weird things like this. 40, 76, 280, 114. That's external, 62 times. Who's using that? In this case, it turns out to be a server called tshost08. Source IP address is internal. Destination IP is 40.76.28114. Management cloud. Anybody know what it is? It's Ops Manager data. That machine has a client. It has the OMS agent installed directly on it. So it's communicating directly with OMS, bypassing our internal agent. And therefore it's using an IP address to communicate because they don't have a name, they actually have an IP address. So in this case, this is fine, but we could have other things like IP addresses that shouldn't be accessed. I think I showed you this yesterday. This is something I really like. You can extract this data. You see I have export, and I also have Power BI, so I can export it to there. I can set alerts. But what you really want to do is that you want to collect all these IP addresses and block them in an external firewall. Basically, none of these IP addresses should reach your system, or you should never reach these systems at all. A couple of months ago, I did this for a customer, and it turned out that we couldn't see anything at all. It was blank. Why? This customer believes in firewalls. Therefore, every firewall on every Windows server was, of course, turned off. And if you turn off the firewall, there's no logging. So you need to have the firewall up and running, and it needs to be configured, otherwise you can't see what's going on. No, but they can see this in the external firewall. Yeah, right. If they could do that, why haven't they blocked these IP addresses? They didn't know these IP addresses was bad. So your solution with turning off the firewall on every Windows machine, instead of having the large firewall, that really works, right? No, it doesn't, obviously. There's a scale around here where you can move around so you can see what, for the last couple of hours, for the last couple of days, so you can see trends going up and down, and you can also change the time, so you can have full 7 days, for instance, if you want to do that. And you can also see where the information is coming from. It's coming from wired data, and it's also coming from the IIS log files, because you're collecting those log files as well. And that's only the log files. Or you can also say, I just want to see the wired data, and have that instead. Apply. Do you mind? Anybody tried this malicious IP address and found funky things or funny things? Nobody? Is this useful? Could anyone here use this for anything useful besides doing pie chart in Excel? I think you could. How many systems do you have that are exposed today and they are under attack every day and you have no idea? It's kind of depressing, right? I work for a company called Trusec. We educate people on hacking systems, and we do that for governments, which is weird, but we do that. We create cyber ranges for governments so they can have IT soldiers being trained on how to hack systems. In China, there are about 3 battalions of IT hackers. Isn't that crazy? They have like 1,400 people approximately that works on a daily basis by hacking other governments. What do you do for a living? I hack people. I'm in the army now. I hack people. So you should really use this information and prevent issues. You also always have a bunch of ready-made common queries. And let's pick one of them. Okay. Now, that's every security event. The interesting thing here is that you can now trigger this down and say, well, I don't want to see all the activities, but I would like to see Kerberos pre-authentication. I would like to see the system time was changed, an account was Kerberos authentication, the domain controller attempted to blah, 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 something like that. I want to do that. So you can filter this down. And every time you filter this down, you're going to see the number of results is dropping down to fewer and fewer and fewer. And then you can, of course, say, well, I don't want custom, I don't want to do now. And you can see it's still recalculating. You can see the process. You can now say, I don't want to see it from all computers. I only want to see it from the following number of computers, the store computers, for instance. And suddenly, you have a new query. And of course, you can do this. You can open it up in Notepad. And you can modify it. And you can paste it in. And you can have a bunch of queries for different things, which is kind of nice. But you can also, of course, save it. And give it a name and a category. So the category is going to be demo stuff. And the name is going to be weird query. And that's now a ready-made question. So you usually start with the built-in, and you trickle them down to exactly what you want to see, and then you save the queries. So you have them, because when you have them, you can use them in the dashboard, which is interesting. If you go back to the solutions again. Beside all these different solutions, we also have the data that we can collect. You do have the possibility to collect logs. Okay? So I can do applications. I want to add application. I don't want to see information. Now when I have application, now I can query on the application log on all the machines. Downside, application log is huge, and it's going to cost you data. So this only works for test, demo, play around, or few servers, or when you have a subscription. But then you have every application log from every system, and you can query against that application log. You're using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, right? So you know that when you do the MDT monitor, it actually has an application. It writes to the application log. The source is MDT_monitor. So that means that now you can have the MDT monitor data shovel up to the OMS, and then you can globally, on a web page, see if you have any failed deployments or succeeded deployment or whatever, and you can connect alerts to that as well. It doesn't see everything, so if I type, for instance, something like that, a lot of people say, okay, so that's going to pick up the built-in log files. It's a static list, so it doesn't mean that you have these logs, but they should be present on the Windows machine. Not all of them, but most of them. But you can have other log files, and then you need to know the name, so you can type in the name. So it's not a representative of what's being gathered from the machine you are on. So you really need to know the log file. But then you can collect that, and when you do that, please don't forget to hit save. Because if you don't, nothing happens. And then, of course, you have all this performance, and you have the IIS logs, and you have custom fields. Okay, so what's custom fields? This is something I don't like. It's when Microsoft points to a blog to explain something in a product. You don't have a help page. No, we just did a blog post on that. Great. What you can do is that you can create your own custom values. And when you do that, and they always end with a CF, then you can use these custom fields to expose that data instead of having it as a data block, which means that you can extract the successful deployment, unsuccessful deployment, or log on from a third-party application. So instead of just having the error, you can extract that information from the blob data in the event. It's time-consuming to set up. I've done it a couple of times, and it kind of makes sense because now you can see search result and get those values as properties, and now you can index and search for that, which is kind of interesting. That means that, I already say that. That means that when you go back, and we have dashboard, the dashboard can, of course, be customized. If I do customize here, and you see alert management, change tracking. Didn't I create a weird query with a demo? So let's add that. So for every query or collection of queries, you can now add to your dashboard. The nice thing about the dashboard is I never use it in here, but I do use it here. See what it is? There it is. Here's the dashboard. The dashboard. So when my wife gets up in the morning, she grabs coffee and she reads the newspaper. I grab a Coke and I read this because it gives me the overview. Bad, good. Is this going to be a good day? Can I come in just later, or do I need to be at home fixing issues before I can even leave to work? And some days I never leave to work. I'm just home fixing issues, answering phones and saying, yes, I'm on it. Yeah. So it makes sense to create these queries for not random things, but things that makes your life interesting. Add those so you can add it to the dashboard later on. But you can also use the log search directly. Let's do performance. This is live local disk. And you can see here, it's going to pop up that I have 278,000 yada yada results and 1,145 metrics. Let's hit metrics. That's a logical free disk space. I don't want to see that. I want to see current disk queue length. Transfer, read, apply. I want to see the last 7 days. I want to see custom. I want to see now. I want to shut that down to like 1 hour, or as short as possible. And if we do this, I want to see total. And now we're actually getting graphs. These are near real time. That's 11/17, 11/17. This is because we're running through Ops Manager. I could have the agent directly and then it would be faster, but at least it gives you the this is the average performance we had. So let's assume that someone calls you and say, hey, we had really bad performance like an hour ago. We don't know what it is. Can you look it up? Yeah, I can. I have all the aggregated logs for every performance on CPU, memory, disk, and whatever you want to have here. And I can trickle that down and give you an estimation. And the fun thing is that it's pretty easy to actually see where the issue started. Here, the CPU is spiking, and it's consuming disk space, and the disk is growing, and that kills the following 3 systems. So it takes approximately half an hour to see where it all started. Can you do this with Performance Monitor? Yes, of course you can. Can you do this with PowerShell? Absolutely. It's going to take you a week to figure out how to collect all the data, and then you need to analyze it. And that takes too long time. Anybody tried this? Anybody seen this before? You tried it? Does it work? Is it fun?
Quite fun.
That's the weird thing. It is actually fun to just sit and enjoy this and go like, yeah, it's moving around. And you just hope nobody is watching you when you say that. Same story here. Of course, I can save this and have this query collected. We believe they are going to improve this much more. Exactly when, I don't know. They renamed one of the parts in the OMS, was it yesterday? Azure, blah, 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 something else. I think they renamed this idea or product or whatever you want to call it. It's 4 times now or 3 times. So every year there's a new name. I have no idea why. Just weird. You can, of course, export everything, and that's nothing fancy at all. But let's go back to the logs again. And let's check this. Show down. Logical disk BI. Dataset to see if this works. Power BI logical disk. Test. Demo. Settings, Power BI. Where did I lose that? Can't even read. The Power BI has been successfully created. You can, yes, exactly. I'm sorry. Another thing you can do, which is kind of interesting, is you can, of course, have the cloud backup and the automation. Now, backup is actually within Azure. So this is just a view to the Azure backup. You can't do any backup here, but you can see that it's working. The same goes for automation. And that's just going to kick up or log me on to the Azure portal. If I go to runbooks, it's going to log me on again, and this time I'm going to be in Azure, and I can see all the runbooks. And the same goes for backup, and the same goes for the other one as well, which is the recovery. So automation, backup, and Azure Site Recovery is just shortcuts to the Azure portal. That might change. We have heard and seen ideas in how to get this into the same console. So it won't be jumping around in different consoles, but currently That's the way it works. I need to get a new throat. There I go, Power BI. Here we have push data to PRB, exactly. And then I need to log on to that, and I don't have the account. But here you can see we are sending data back to the Power BI so we can extract data from that as well. So the big question about OMS is very simple. You can do any weird things. I've seen a blog post where you can download a management pack for Ops Manager that collects information about how many tweets you're sending and feeding that back. There's all kinds of weird things that doesn't really mean anything today. The thing we are missing today is actions. It doesn't have a remediation. Remediation is still in Ops Manager. So about 6 months ago, I was at Microsoft, and they said, OMS is never going to replace this because there is no remediation. 10 minutes later, they introduced remediation. So there will be remediation here. Eventually, OMS is going to be some kind of replacement for Ops Manager. But today it isn't. Today it is a companion. It's an analyzing tool. It is the central location for all the logs. So the question is, can you really use this? I would say yes. But it's not going to be amazing unless you start collecting data. And you also need to know what to do with all the data. So it's not the tool itself that is good. It's just a collection of data. So the question is, what data should you collect and how should you analyze that? How much analyzing do you do today with Ops Manager? How many of you are using Ops Manager today? Okay, how many of you create your own reports, analyze data, have meetings with yourself and data in rooms, with, PowerPoints, pie charts, stuff like that? It's just a few people around the globe that actually do this. They will benefit from this because it's easier to collect the data in real time. But that is the only thing it is right now. So, of everybody here that has Operations Manager, how many of you have connected your Ops Manager environment to OMS today? Anyone? What do you use it for? No useful, no real life use. You just have it, right? Anybody using OMS for any other purposes than playing with it? Nobody. That's great. Everybody has it. Nobody's using it. So what will it take before you can use it? What needs to be changed? Is it the technology that needs to change, or do you need to change? That's the big question, because I really believe this is good, but you need to change as individuals. The biggest problem we have right now is if you are using OMS. Okay, so you're in here, and you can see that administrator has logged on 5,000 times in less than an hour. What do? Nothing. Yeah, snipping tools and send an email. If you can see that every SQL server that you have doesn't have a backup, what do? Nothing. That's the problem. We know it's wrong, and nobody does anything about it because we are not really in that organization. It doesn't work that way. You are responsible for hardware or for network or for Windows or for that particular service. Should everybody be in here? No. Should should it send alarms to everyone? No. Someone needs to be in here and take responsible for the entire environment and tell everybody else what to do. But if I go to you and say, hey, you're not doing your job, your SQL servers are busted, fix this, your immediate response is, exactly. So in what way does Microsoft believe this is going to work? Because if you don't believe it, and they do, you do have a different opinion than what they have, right? There has to be a difference here. And the difference is that they don't really divide the company in the same way that most enterprise companies does today. They don't really have storage guys and network guys and Windows Server guys and SQL guys, and they have guys. That's it. They just work with the solution, not the product itself. And this is just to be able to see a complete solution. So, yes, Active Directory is a part of this. I could, and I think it would be nice if you could have different dashboards. So you can have your own dashboard, I can have my own dashboard, and we can see different solutions. It is possible to do that, but then you need to have multiple subscriptions, and that's going to cost you money, and you also need to change the workspace. So it's not really meant for multi-group tendency. It's more of, this is what you can see in the entire organization. But I had a chat with someone that left the session yesterday, and he said, we're only using it for Active Directory. And I'm monitoring Active Directory, and that's the only thing I do. And I have domain controllers in 66 different countries. And that makes sense, because then it's almost cheap. Not really, because it's a lot of data. And that's the only thing he does. So we do have customers that does that as well. They're monitoring just SQL servers, or just Active Directory, or just security. And then it makes sense in the other end, because then the guy that owns the system only monitors one thing. But then you're missing the big picture instead. So can it replace Operations Manager? No, I don't believe it can. But eventually it will.
Question.
Yes.
Can you post, you can post the Power BI, but can you post different workspaces in the Power BI? You can have possibilities that work there.
Every workspace has its own BI account. So there's no cross connection between that. And the same goes for the backup and for the run books, and everything is isolated in one account. So for instance, in this solution, if I go to management, and there you go. I can only have one organization, and I have only one Power BI account. And that's for this solution. If I log on to another solution, there's going to be another Power BI account, and it can connect to another organization. So each of these workspaces are a separate organization, and they can only have one account for each solution, or for each workspace. So eventually they need to change that. I believe they need to change that, because it's not really multi-tenancy today.
Do you know if Squared Up has a solution for that?
If
Squared Up has a solution for that? They publish on dashboard.
I don't know that, so I can't say that. What I do know is that a lot of third-party vendors are working together with Microsoft to provide additional solutions, additional connectors. So I think Microsoft is trying to create this ecosystem. They used to have like third-party management pack. They want to do the same thing here. But not only management pack, it's going to be in, out connectors, and solutions for different solutions. But that's going to take time. So right now, your goal is very simple. It's just to install it, get used to it, and learn how to extract information from the logs, so you can create nice dashboards, so you don't need to watch the news in the morning, because it's just war and people are dying and all that stuff. I hate that. Well, that was a good question. Any other questions? Yes?
Can we get the capacity
Can you repeat the question, please?
Is it able to get capacity planning data if you're using VMware?
So the question is, can you use capacity data if you're running VMware? Yes and no. Yes, from a perspective, if you're using Virtual Machine Manager to control your VMware environment, part of that data will be available, but not all. So, yeah, I think the official statement will be no. But in reality, you will get some data, but you can't get all, because you can't monitor the host correctly. That's the problem. Does it surprise you? It's a weird. I usually get the question with Windows Server 2016. People are asking, so if we're running VMware, what's the new thing about Windows Server 2016? The start menu is new. That's it. But it was a good question. I know that there's a long answer to that as well. The connection between Virtual Machine Manager and VMware has been around for a long time. And every time we meet Microsoft, they ask us if we think it's okay to remove it. And we usually say, no, I want to have it, because it's nice to be able to do the integration. Turns out that Microsoft has approximately 35,000 installations of Virtual Machine Manager. 6 of them are using the VMware integration. And it's usually just meant for the companies that use it for a short period of time so they can kill the VMware environment. So that's why they ask us to remove it. And that's also why I don't think they want to spend more money on it, because it's not really used that well. I think they should have it even if it's not used at all, because it's, it should just be there. No arguments. Any other questions? Did anyone learn anything that you didn't already knew? One. Okay, that's great. Go home, play with this, install it. If you do have any questions, send me an email. Or if you want to know how you do something that you couldn't figure it out on your own, let me know. And I can either contact the team or I can create a blog post on that topic. Thank you.